Imagine zooming in on the tip of your pencil until you can't see the wood or the graphite anymore. You'd eventually find the incredibly small building blocks of all matter, atoms. The reason we study atoms is to understand why materials behave the way they do. The power of the periodic table, which is our focus today, is that it helps us predict the properties of elements just by knowing their atomic structure. Understanding the atom's tiny components is the key to unlocking the whole science of chemistry. The idea of the atom isn't new. It goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks. A philosopher named Democritus suggested that all matter was made of atomos, meaning uncuttable or indivisible. His idea was forgotten for a long time until the early 1800s, when John Dalton, a scientist, brought the idea back with real evidence. Dalton's work marked the true beginning of modern atomic theory, moving the concept from philosophy to a measurable science. Dalton's theory, based on his experiments, said that atoms were like tiny solid spheres. He proposed that all atoms of a specific element were exactly alike, like identical marbles, and that atoms couldn't be destroyed or changed. While we know now that some of these claims aren't perfectly true, we can split atoms, for example. Dalton's work was absolutely essential. It gave us the first scientific framework for how matter is structured, setting the stage for every discovery that followed. The idea of the solid, uncuttable atom was shattered in the late 1800s by J.J. Thomson. He used a special piece of equipment called a cathode ray tube and discovered a stream of particles that were negatively charged and incredibly light. He called these particles electrons. Since the atom was known to be electrically neutral, Thomson suggested his famous plum pudding model, a positively charged sphere with tiny negative electrons dotted throughout it, like plums in a pudding or chocolate chips in a cookie. Thomson's model didn't last long, though. His student Ernest Rutherford conducted one of the most famous experiments in science, the gold foil experiment. He expected the positive alpha particles he fired at the foil to pass straight through with only minor deflections. To his shock, some of them bounced right back. Rutherford concluded that the atom couldn't be a solid pudding. It had to be mostly empty space with a tiny, dense, positively charged center he called the nucleus. So the result of Rutherford's work gives us the core of the modern atom. Picture it like a miniature solar system, but with a few crucial differences. The nucleus is the sun, tiny, dense, and containing almost all the atom's mass. Surrounding it is a vast area called the electron cloud. The nucleus holds the positive charge, and the cloud holds the negative charge, giving the whole structure its basic electrical balance. Let's zoom into the nucleus. The first key particle is the proton. Protons have a positive charge and are fundamentally important because their count determines the element's identity. Think of the atomic number like the element's social security number or a fingerprint. It's unique. If an atom has 6 protons, it is carbon. If it gains a proton, it is no longer carbon. It becomes nitrogen. No matter what, the proton count defines the element. Also found in the nucleus are neutrons. These particles are electrically neutral, meaning they have no charge, which is why they are so hard to detect. Their job is primarily to add mass and, crucially, to act as a kind of glue that stabilizes the nucleus. Remember, all those positive protons would naturally repel each other, so the neutrons help to cushion and hold the nucleus together. Finally, we have the electrons. These are the lightweight particles that carry a negative charge and zip around the nucleus in the electron cloud. Their charge is equal and opposite to that of a proton. In a standard neutral atom, the number of electrons perfectly matches the number of protons, creating a zero net charge. The movement and location of these electrons are what drive all of chemistry. When you look at the periodic table, the atomic number Z is the larger, usually whole number above the element symbol. As we've established, it's the count of the protons. For example, look at oxygen. Its atomic number is 8, which means every single oxygen atom in the universe has exactly 8 protons in its nucleus. It's the most essential piece of information for identifying an element. The mass number, A, gives us the total number of particles in the nucleus, which means we're simply adding the number of protons and neutrons together. Since electrons are so tiny, they contribute almost nothing to the atom's total mass. So, if a particular atom has 6 protons and 6 neutrons, its mass number is 12. This number is specific to that particular atom and its isotope. Knowing these definitions makes calculating the parts of an atom straightforward. If you're given an element and its mass number, you can always find the number of protons because that's the atomic number. In a neutral atom, the electrons are the same as the protons. The trickiest one is the neutron count, but it's just subtraction. Take the mass number and subtract the atomic number. It's like a simple puzzle to figure out the atom's ingredients. The concept of isotopes is where the neutron count gets interesting. Isotopes are atoms of the same element, meaning they have the same number of protons, but they have a different number of neutrons. For example, all carbon atoms have 6 protons. Carbon-12 has 6 neutrons, but the isotope carbon-14 has 8 neutrons. This mass difference affects the atom's stability, which is why some isotopes are radioactive, but it doesn't change its chemical identity. It's important not to confuse the mass number with the atomic mass on the periodic table. The mass number is a whole number you calculate for a specific isotope, like carbon-12. The atomic mass, however, is the decimal number you see on the table. This decimal value is a weighted average of all the naturally occurring isotopes of that element. Since carbon-12 is far more common than carbon-14, the average atomic mass of carbon is 12.011, a little more than 12. What happens when an atom loses or gains electrons? It becomes an ion, which is a charged particle. If an atom loses negative electrons, it becomes overall positive, and we call it a cation. Think of it this way. Losing something negative, an electron, makes you positive. Conversely, if an atom gains electrons, it becomes negatively charged, and we call it an anion. Understanding ions is critical because it explains how elements join together to form compounds. The Bohr model gave us a slightly better picture of where those electrons actually are. Niels Bohr suggested that electrons aren't just in a random cloud. They travel in specific, fixed paths called energy levels or shells. Think of them like rungs on a ladder. An electron must gain a specific, discrete amount of energy to jump from a lower rung to a higher one. This is key to understanding how elements absorb and emit light, like the specific colors you see in fireworks. The most important electrons in chemistry are the valence electrons. These are the electrons found in the outermost energy shell. Why are they so important? Because they are the only ones that interact when one atom meets another. They're the hands that atoms use to grab onto each other and form chemical bonds. The number of valence electrons an element has is the single biggest predictor of its chemical behavior. To quickly visualize these crucial valence electrons, we use electron dot diagrams, also known as Lewis structures. You simply write the element's chemical symbol, and then place dots around it to represent the number of valence electrons. It's a super helpful shortcut. For example, because oxygen has 6 valence electrons, you would draw the symbol O with 6 dots around it. This simple diagram tells you a lot about how oxygen is likely to bond. This brings us back to the power of the periodic table. The table isn't just a list. It's organized to reflect atomic structure. The columns, called groups, are organized so that every element in a group has the same number of valence electrons. Because the number of valence electrons dictates chemical behavior, all the elements in a single column will behave in chemically similar ways. So how do we use this information to predict properties? Look at group 1, the alkali metals. They all have one valence electron. Because having a full outer shell is stable, they desperately want to lose that single electron, making them extremely reactive. Now, look at group 18, the noble gases. They all have 8 valence electrons, a full outer shell. They are perfectly stable, so they are almost entirely unreactive. By simply knowing an element's position on the periodic table, you can predict its reactivity, the type of ion it will form, and how it will interact with other elements. That's the true genius of atomic theory and the periodic table.